guys. Read Aloud, day 73. Here we go. Yeah, that's good enough for today. Alright, let's see where we were. A thought crossed Miss Frisby's mind. She changed direction again and, moving more quickly, ran across the earth to where Jeremy stood. He was hopping around the shiny piece of foil, eyeing it from one direction and another. What had occurred to Miss Frisby was that although Jeremy was not the brightest of animals she had met, and though he was young, he knew things and places she did not, and one had to begin somewhere. As she approached him, he had picked up the foil in his beak and was spreading his wings to fly off. "Wait, please," she called. He turned, folding his wings, and replaced the foil carefully on the ground. "Hello," he said. "You remember me? Of course, you saved me from the cat." And then he added, "What do you think of this piece of foil?" Miss Frisby looked at it without much interest. "It's just a piece of foil," she said. "It's not very big." "True, but it's shiny, especially when the sun strikes it just so." "Why are you so interested in shiny things?" "Well, really, I'm not. At least not very. But I have a friend who likes them, so when I see one, I pick it up." "I see, that's very thoughtful. And would the friend be a female?" As a matter of fact, yes, she is. How did you know?" Just a guess," said Miss Frisby. "Do you remember saying once that if I needed your help, I might ask you?" "I do, any time. Just ask for Jeremy. Any of the crows can find me. And now, if you'll excuse me." He bent over to pick up the foil again. "Please don't go yet," said Miss Frisby. "I think perhaps you can help me now." "Ah," said Jeremy. "What kind of help? Are you hungry? I'll bring you some seeds from the barn loft. I know where they're stored." "No, thank you," said Miss Frisby. "We have enough to eat." And then she told him, as briefly as she could, about Timothy, the sickness, and the problem of moving day. Jeremy knew about moving day. Crows did not have to move, but they kept a close watch on such activities as plowing and planting so as to get their fair share of what's planted. And with their sharp eyes, they see the small animals leaving before the plow. So he clucked sympathetically when he heard about Miss Frisby's story, cocked his head to one side and thought as hard as he could for as long as he could, which was about 30 seconds. His eyes closed with effort. "I don't know what you should do," he said finally. "I'm sorry, but maybe I can help even so. At least I can tell you what we do. I can tell you what we do when we don't know what we do." "We?" "The crows, most of the birds." "What do you do then?" "Over that way." Jeremy nodded in the direction of the deep woods and faraway mountains that rose behind the fence. "About a mile from here, there grows a very large beech tree, the biggest tree in the whole forest. Near the top of the tree, there is a hollow in the trunk, and in the hollow lives an owl who is the oldest animal in the woods, some say in the world. When we don't know what to do, we ask him. Sometimes he answers our questions, sometimes he doesn't. It depends on how he feels. Or, as my father used to say, what kind of humor he's in. Or possibly, thought Miss Frisby, on whether or not he knows the answer. But she said, "Could you ask him then if he knows of any help for me?" She did not think it likely that he would. "Ah, no," Jeremy said, "that won't do. That is, I could ask him, but I don't think the owl would listen. Imagine, a crow comes to ask for help for a lady mouse with a sick child. He wouldn't believe me." "Then what's to be done?" "What's to be done? You must go yourself and ask him." "But I could never find the tree, and if I did, I don't think I could climb so high." "Ah, now that is where I can help. As I said, I would, and I will carry you there on my back the way I did before, and home again, of course." Miss Frisby hesitated. It was one thing to leap on a crow's back when the cat is only 3 jumps away and coming fast, but quite another to do it deliberately, and to fly deep into the woods and unknown forest. In short, Miss Frisby was afraid. Then she thought of Timothy and of the big steel plow blade. She told herself, "I have no choice. If there is any chance that the owl might be able to help me, to advise me, I must go," she said to Jeremy. "Thank you very much. I will go and talk to the owl if you will take me. It's a great favor." "It's nothing," said Jeremy. "You're welcome. But we can't go now. Why not? In the daytime, when the sun is out, the owl goes deep into the hollow and sleeps. That is to say, he sleeps, but I don't believe it. How could anyone sleep so long? I think he sits in there part of the time at least and thinks, and that's why he knows so much. But anyway, he won't speak to anyone in the daytime, not anymore. But anyway, he won't speak in the daytime not to anyone, and at night he's out flying and hunting. I know, said Miss Frisbee, and that was another reason to be afraid. The time to see him is just at dusk. Then, when the light gets dim and he comes to the entrance of the hollow and watches while the darkness comes in, that's the time to ask him questions. I understand, said Miss Frisbee. Shall we go this evening? At 5 o'clock, Jeremy said. I'll be at your house. He picked up the piece of foil in his bill and waved goodbye and flew off. The Owl. Jeremy appeared as promised when the last thumbnail of sun winked over the mountains beyond the meadow. Miss Frisbee was waiting, her heart pounding in her ears, and 3 of her children were there to watch. Teresa and Martin standing beside their mother, and Cynthia, who was afraid of the crow, just a pair of round eyes peering out of the round doorway. Timothy was down below taking a nap, and he had not been told about the expedition lest he worry and blame himself for the risk his mother must take. Indeed, the words moving day had not been mentioned in his presence. Even to the other children, Miss Frisbee had explained only part of their problem. That is, she had not told them that there were only 5 days left, nor anything about Mr. Fitzgibbon and the tractor. She did not want them to worry either. Jeremy landed with a swoosh, a bit dramatically perhaps, and nodded at the children and Miss Frisbee. Hello, he said. Here I am. Miss Frisbee introduced Martin and Teresa in Cynthia's eyes. Martin, who wished he were going on the trip himself, asked Jeremy in excitement, How high can you fly? Oh, I don't know exactly, Jeremy said. A couple of miles, I guess. Mother, did you hear? You'll be 2 miles up in the air. Martin, it won't be necessary to go so high on this trip. Jeremy said cheerfully, No, but I can if you'd like. No, thank you. I wouldn't think of you taking the trouble. She was trying hard to hide her terror, and Martin had not helped matters at all. But Jeremy suddenly saw that she was trembling and realized that she must be afraid. It's all right, he said kindly. There's nothing to be nervous about. I'll fly over the woods a dozen times a day. I fly over the woods a dozen times a day. Yes, thought Miss Frisbee, but you're not riding on your back, and you can't fall off. All right, she said as bravely as she could. I'm ready. Teresa and Martin, take care of Timothy until I come back, and be sure you don't tell him where I've gone. With a small leap, she was on Jeremy's back, lying as flat as she could and holding tight to the glossy feathers between his wings. As a horseback rider grips the horse's mane before a jump, Martin and Teresa waved goodbye, but she did not see them, for she had her face pressed against the feathers and her eyes closed. Once again, she felt a surge of power as the crow's broad wings beat down against the air. This time it lasted longer, for they were going higher than before, and then the beating became gentler as they leveled off, and then, to her alarm, it stopped altogether. What's wrong? The crow must have felt her grow tense, for suddenly, from ahead, she heard his voice. An updraft, he said. We're soaring. There's usually one over this stretch of woods in the evening. A current of warm air rising from the woods was carrying them along. So smooth was the motion that they seemed to be standing still, and Miss Frisbee ventured to open her eyes and lift her head just a trifle. She could not look straight down. That was Jeremy's back, but off to her right and a bit behind them, she saw a gray-brown square the size of a postage stamp, and she realized with a gasp that it was the garden patch, and that Martin and Teresa, if they were still there, were too small to be seen. Look to the left, said Jeremy, who was watching her over her shoulder. She did, and saw what looked like a wide, fearsome snake, blue-green in color, coiling through the woods. What is it? She asked in wonder. You really don't know? It's the river. Oh, said Miss Frisbee, rather ashamed of her ignorance. She had heard of the river, of course, but had not known that it looked like a snake. She had never been there, since to reach it one had to cross the entire width of the forest. There were advantages to being a bird. In a minute more, they had left the updraft, and Jeremy's wings resumed pumping. They went higher, and Miss Frisbee closed her eyes again. When she opened them, the garden patch had vanished far behind them, and Jeremy, searching the trees below, began a long, slanting descent. Eventually, as he banked sharply, Miss Frisbee saw off his wingtip a gray-brown patch among a strand of tall green pines. From so high it looked like a gnarled gray bush, but as they circled lower she could see that it was in fact an enormous tree, leafless, skeletal, and partially dead. One huge branch had recently broken off and fallen, and 3 pine trunks lay bent double under its weight. It was a gloomy, primeval spot, deeply shadowed in the gray dusk. Jeremy circled over it one more time, looking at a certain mark 3/4 of the way up the towering tree trunk. Just below this spot, another great branch, itself as big as an ordinary tree, jutted out of the tops of the pines, and on this, at last, Jeremy fluttered gently to rest. They were some 10 feet from the main trunk, and Miss Frisbee could see, just above the place where the branch joined the tree, a dark round hole as large as a lunch plate. "We're here," Jeremy said in a low voice. "There's where he lives. Should I get down?" Instinctively, Miss Frisbee spoke in a whisper. "Yes, we've got to walk closer, but quietly. He doesn't like loud noises." "It's so high." She still clung to the crow's back. "But the limb is broad. You'll be safe enough." And indeed, the limb was almost as wide as the sidewalk. Miss Frisbee gathered her courage, slithered down, and felt the solid wood under her feet. Still, she could not help thinking about how far it was to the ground. "There he is," said Jeremy, staring at the hole. "It's just the right time." They inched their way along the limb, Miss Frisbee grasping the rough bark tightly, being careful not to stumble as they came closer. She could dimly perceive a shape like a squat vase sitting back in the hollow of the tree. Near the top of the vase, wide apart, 2 round yellow eyes glowered in the dark. He can't see us," Jeremy whispered. "It's still too light." Perhaps not, but he could hear, for now a deep, round voice, a voice like an organ tone, echoed out from the hollow trunk. "Who is standing outside my house?" Jeremy answered, "Sir, I am a crow. My name is Jeremy, and I have brought a friend. I hope we have not disturbed you. My friend needs your advice." "I see, and can your friend not speak for himself?" "Sir, my friend is a lady mouse." "A mouse?" The sonorous voice sounded unbelieving. "Why should a crow be a friend to a mouse?" "I was trapped, sir, and she set me free. She saved me from the cat." "That is possible," said the owl, "though unusual. I have heard of such a thing before. We all help one another against the cat." "True, and now, sir, my friend herself is in trouble." "I understand," said the owl, moving closer to the round entrance of his hole. Mrs. Mouse, I cannot see you, for the glare of the daylight is too bright, but if you will step inside my house, I will listen to what you have to say." Miss Frisbee hesitated. She knew something of the dietary habits of owls, and she did not much like the idea of being trapped in his house. Finally, she said timidly, "Sir, I would not want to intrude, and I can hear you quite well from out here." All right, guys. We'll read more tomorrow.